Pressure from electricity consumers in Cameroon has pushed NAO, the electricity supply company, to revise the problem of overbilling. Peter Nsosie in this newscast will relay to us what the new measures are adopted to ameliorate this situation. The recently launched COVID-19 testing site at the Bonasama Nursery School, launched by the governor of the Littoral Region, Governor Samuel Dieudonné Ivaha, is experiencing some loopholes in equipment for the smooth running of the work. Find out in this newscast how they are coping with these difficulties. And in sports, tensions sprout between the Cameroon government and the Confederation of African Football over the host of semi-finals and finals of the CAF Championship. Those are our top stories. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining the 6 p.m. newscast on Spectrum Television. I am Josephine Bindzi. Honorable Jean-Michel Ninche has called for deep investigations into the handling of COVID-19 response by the Ministry of Public Health. In a public outing today, the SDF Member of Parliament says government's efforts to contain the pandemic is marred by corruption, embezzlement of funds, and overbilling of medical equipment. Details with you, Peter Nsosie.
Jean-Michel Ninche has taken the Minister of Public Health to task over what he says is a catastrophic management of the COVID-19 pandemic in Cameroon. He believes that the response is shrouded by embezzlement of funds, overbilling of equipment, and poor decision-making. The SDF Member of Parliament has frowned at the absence of the minister throughout the just-ended parliamentary session, wondering whether Dr. Manauda Malashi is hiding something from Cameroonians. Even the special plenary on the role of traditional medicine in the fight against COVID-19 did not see his presence. Ninche observes that Cameroon is recording increasing cases of COVID-19, which to him implies the response plan is not effective. The SDF regional chairman also fouls the minister for abandoning medical staff despite giving their all to turn the tides. He backs his arguments on insufficient test kits, artificial respirators, drugs and personal protective equipment in hospitals. He also reveals that the Mbappé Stadium Specialized Center is yet to open, with the structure having no bed or toilet. Overbilling of equipment is another vice echoed by Jean-Michel Ninche, highlighting that gloves, infrared thermometers, surgical masks, and protective suits are 30 times more expensive than in pharmacies. The Member of Parliament is calling on competent services of the Republic to open investigations over the management of the COVID-19 pandemic response in Cameroon.
Still talking about COVID-19, and now we talk difficulties faced by frontliners. A high risk of contamination, infection and death rates are some of the difficulties encountered by the medical corps fighting the COVID-19 pandemic at the front lines. At the Bonasama Nursery School screening site, quite a handful of challenges have been outlined by workers, though the funds of them have already been provided, as Oni Ladone tells us in the following report.
Frontline workers at the government nursery school Bonasama, a screening center in the Douala 4 municipality, have raised up the various challenges experienced by the medical body in the center on the fight against the COVID-19 virus.
Depuis le 17 juin 2020, date de mise en place du système.
Ever since the creation of a screening center here at the district hospital Bonasama on the 17th of June 2020, we have experienced difficulties that have greatly affected our activities. The first being the absence of a service agent, a security officer, a neck badge for patients, chairs, because the funds allocated for these have all been exhausted. The lack of communication credits for the team and internet connections used in giving out test results. The team also faced some resistance from the public in regards to testing, issuing results, as well as taking care of patients. At the level of the patients, we have faced two major difficulties. That is, very difficult and elaborate contact listing, and the non-cooperation of patients presenting signs of the COVID-19 that have to be admitted. All these backdrops were highlighted during the launching of the decentralization plan against the COVID-19 in the littoral region by the Governor Samuel Dieudonné Ivaha on the 10th of April 2020.
Laxity and nonchalance in the transport sector in the city of Douala is a core for concern. Many are disinterested in the wearing of face masks and overload. Moving around town today, our reporter Oni Ladonet gathered the following report for the 6 p.m. newscast.
Transporters in the second most contaminated city in the country seem to be indifferent in regards to respecting barrier measures, despite the increasing number of COVID-19 cases in Cameroon. The need to wear a face mask or respect social distancing is no longer obligatory, but an individual's choice. Face mask is no longer relevant. Some wear it while others don't. I have kept mine. I wore it in the morning, but removed it because it's suffocating, but I will wear it later. It's compulsory we carry 2 people with their face mask. It's compulsory. We do carry 1 passenger, but carrying 2 doesn't pose any problem as long as they have their face mask on. Now with customers, when a customer comes without face mask, we tell them to wear their face mask. When they refuse, we don't have a choice. Since they haven't reduced the prices of petrol, we are forced to carry them like that without face mask. This negligence has been blamed on the inability to make ends meet when these measures are being respected.
Nous voulons entendre de l'État ce qu'il devait vraiment nous aider
dans
le transport, mais actuellement quand nous travaillons, porter 2 personnes, on dit que c'est un problème. Lorsqu'on porte aussi 1 personne, nous ne s'en sortons plus. Donc quelle est alors une moyenne vraiment qui peut être vraiment suffisante pour nous suffire de ce que nous faisons dans notre travail?
According to these transporters, in order to fully adhere to the sanitary rules prescribed by authorities, sanitary gadgets like face masks, hand sanitizers have to be made affordable by the government.
Ce que nous proposons à l'État, nous proposons seulement qu'il doit nous aider, soit avec une petite somme qui peut nous aider, mais on sait que l'État ne peut même pas aider tout le monde avec de l'argent, mais
is the government should either help us with small amounts of money that can help us, but we know the government cannot help everyone with money. But the government can also help with some COVID-19 kits like face masks, soap, hand sanitizers, so every day we can change our face mask, so it can reduce the cost of getting them, because face masks cost 1,300 francs, the one produced by SICAM. Even a shirt at Marché Central costs 1,000 francs, and face mask 1,300. The face mask produced by tellers at home do not help protect us against the coronavirus.
Les couturiers du quartier ne fonctionnent pas très bien pour le coronavirus, et ça n'aide même pas dans la protection contre le corona.
Despite the laxity experienced, users of this system of transport have called on all to unfailingly wear their face mask, as it not only protects one from the pandemic, but also from other contagious diseases like tuberculosis.
C'est mieux d'entrer dans la voiture avec le truc-ci, puisque
it's good to enter a taxi while wearing the face mask. When I'm outside, I am free. But when I'm inside a taxi, it's good I wear it. It helps to prevent other diseases, not only the COVID-19. One can get tuberculosis while in such a confined space. It's not only for COVID-19. Even if there's no COVID-19, people should always have their face mask on so as to prevent other contagious diseases. The fight of the COVID-19 still remains a communal fight, and with the participation of all, victory is sure.
Leisure sites which used to be crowded during weekends and holidays are experiencing a downturn in business. Though the number of recovered cases of the COVID-19 has increased, parents still don't want to expose their children to contamination, as John Paul Sama tells us.
Once upon a time in leisure parks like this one, parents brought their kids to just hang out and have fun while riding the motor roller coaster or just taking time out to enjoy the pool. Fast track to this day, the coronavirus has impaired the fun for kids.
There is really nothing going on here now. Before, most of our clients came here for the games with their children.
And in the process, besmirching the source of livelihood for many, making it difficult keeping these items in the facility clean for business as usual.
It is said that things should be disinfected, which is good, but in this case, it is not evident to disinfect those things minute by minute for children to come swim and ride. It takes a lot of work and it is costly.
The lack of clients has also seen the staff size chopped down to a considerable minimum.
Some of our staff have been told to stay home for now because before there was a lot of things to do which required a certain number of people. Some managed the play area while I worked with others in the bar. Since the COVID-19 pandemic stroke, I am alone here with one other colleague.
Since the coming of the coronavirus, economic activities that provided solace to many, like this one, and pleasure to others, have been forced to shut down given the restrictions in place to curb the deadly virus.
The fight against cholera might not be ending anytime soon as new suspected cases are detected. According to reports published on July 3, 2020, more than 500 suspected cases of cholera have been decoded in Cameroon, with the center, south, littoral and east regions in Cameroon being the most affected till date. Details with you, Oniladonet.
All actions taken by the government to eradicate the cholera epidemic from the country seems to have been washed down the drain. According to reports, on July 3, 2020, more than 500 cases of cholera were suspected in the nation's territory, with the central, southern, eastern and littoral regions being the most affected. The number of suspected and confirmed cases in the littoral region stands at over 31, with about 20 deaths. Even before the detection of a positive case of COVID-19 in March 2020, Cameroon had for the years 2018 to 2020 recorded over 120 deaths from cholera. A statistics made public by the Ministry of Health in January 2020. For these 2 years, the nation had about 2,000 suspected cases. A difference of 2,000 cases in 2 years to almost 500 cases in about 7 months have been blamed by some health observers in Cameroon on the relaxation of administrative authorities towards the fight. A step influenced by the outbreak of the novel coronavirus affecting the world. However, cholera still remains a contagious disease, and it should be recalled that over 42 persons were killed in the northern part of the country last year, 2019, as a result of the cholera epidemic. This intestinal infection, contracted following the ingestion of contaminated food or water, appeared for the first time in Cameroon in 1971 and has over the years claimed the lives of several individuals.
And onto this top story, the electricity supply NAO has announced a series of measures to resolve the problem of overbilling. This follows pressure from clients and the civil society actors after the company failed to respect the order from the Minister of Water and Energy to stop the estimation of monthly bills. Peter Nsosier with details on this.
NAO has announced it will no longer continue with the estimation mechanism to determine monthly bills. Henceforth, the company returns to the meter-reading method. In a release signed July 13, 2020, the company said it would test a self-reading approach with some customer segments. The development follows bitter complaints from electricity consumers in the country, accusing the company of dishing out exorbitant bills which did not match the reality of their meter readings.
I am indeed surprised with the manner in which the electricity consumption billing is carried out recently. I received a bill and did not recognize it to be my consumption. From simple to double, from 200 kilowatts to over 400 kilowatts. When I tried to inquire at the NEO agency, I was not received due to the COVID-19 restrictions.
The National Consumer Network had also condemned NEO for continuing with the estimation of indices even after the arbitration of the Electricity Regulatory Agency ARCEL and an order from the Minister of Water and Energy to end the procedure. What we want is that these measures be respected to the latter, and NEO should respect the Minister's decision to resolve the conflict. A special system for accelerated handling of related complaints has been set up with a 72-hour processing period. Within the dispute, the company will not disconnect her services with the clients.
And on our international page, the death of African-American George Floyd in police custody has spurred calls for reforms in the law of enforcement of practices in the United States. Details with the VOA.
So here we have me graduating from the police academy. This is my chief at the time. Quite happy to have a gun and a badge. I was working on the bus. We used to wear plain clothes on the bus. And that's me, was a general manager. I just made sergeant. I remember being the only African-American female in that group of promotees. I remember the levels of competitiveness and the gratification that I was able to compete at that level and excel. My name is Tracy Simmons, and I am a retired deputy chief of the Metro Transit Police Department. I served there for over 25 years in various capacities. I came up through the ranks, and I retired at the rank of deputy chief, and I was the first African-American woman to reach that rank at my police agency. It was very intimidating for a young woman, especially a young black woman. I was in a highly, Anglo workplace with majority male, and it was challenging. You had to get in to fit in, to get along, and really, you really still weren't a part of, be clear. When in the police department, there was rampant sexism, rampant racism. There were remarks made in roll calls that I wouldn't dare repeat. And as I was there, because I was there, I got to be a voice for things that needed to change and be different. Police! There'll be a certain segment of racism because we come from those same communities. Police officers come from those same communities, and they bring along with them their belief systems, their worldviews, and their cultural experiences. I think it's just come to a head. I think there's a lot of things that we get to see now because of technology that has occurred for many, many years, and that now is kind of in our face. We all had an opportunity to see George Floyd, be murdered right on television. I've never seen anything like it in my life, and I don't think most Americans have. I think that our country is in a breakdown. And I think that around police brutality and law enforcement, I would tell the protesters that I support them wholeheartedly. I would tell them to be thoughtful and be aware that there are other stories and other spaces. That's a part of the story, but it's not the real story. It doesn't tell the story of the 10 police officers that got killed last week. It doesn't tell that story. Or the guys down the street that got shot by other assailants, who the police locked up and now they're in jail. So there are a lot of stories here to be told. And so I'm hopeful. I do think that there are definite ways that we can begin to change the culture, and we get to just, retire out those that want to hold on to the old ways. It's not like it's changing, and those that aren't ready to change need to move on. They need to go.
Not only that, but he can mend your brokenness. Because he changed not only this country, not only the United States, he changed the world. George Floyd changed the world.
We get to say what legacy George Floyd's death has on us as a people. As long as people feel like isn't just going to die out like all the rest of them, because those 4 officers will go to jail for a very long time. But it doesn't mean I feel super safe about my son driving at night. It just doesn't.
And on our sports page, the Cameroon government has rejected the proposal by the Confederation of African Football to host the 2020 semi-finals and finals of the CAF Champions League. This was disclosed today by the president of the Cameroon Football Association, as John Paul Sama tells us.
FECAFOOT's president, Seydou Mboumboujoya, has officially announced that Cameroon will not host the 2020 last 4 finals of the CAF Champions League. The FA boss, during a media briefing, cited that the government turned down the proposal from the Confederation of African Football because of the coronavirus.
Last Friday, 10 July 2020, I, as the president of Cameroon Federation Association, I have informed CAF that the offer that he made to us to organize the Champions League in the former Final Four at the stadium of Douala, Japoma Stadium. I have announced, I have informed CAF that the government has not accepted to host this the semi-final and the final of the Champions League because of the evolution of the pandemic of COVID-19, as you know, and with the less of visibility that we can have of in terms of evolution of this competition.
Cameroon was supposed to host the competition last May, but was postponed as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak, with the continent's football governing body now left with the Herculean task of searching for a new host venue to complete the continent's top-tier league, with 2 Moroccan and Egyptian outfits in contention.
And still in sports, a 5-man team has been put up in place by the Technical Transitional Committee to review the standards of professional football in Cameroon. John Paul Sama looks at the mission of the team.
The local football scene in Cameroon is expected to be given a facelift, as the country's league management body has appointed a 5-man commission charged with the review of the standards of professional football in the country. The mission of this ad hoc committee, headed by Owona Pascal Bailon, is expected to work on the status and contracts of players, as well as the roadmap for professional clubs in Cameroon. They are also expected to reflect on the issues concerning the protection of players in relation to their social insurance fund. The team, which also has in its ranks former Indomitable Lions international Lucien Metomo, have the arduous task of making the country's football live up to international standards by making sure that all the key actors play their role for the development of the country's soccer, and why not render it competitive to attract investors, especially in the local League 1 and 2 championships.
And that was a package we put together for tonight's edition of the news. Thanks for watching us. Stay tuned with Orion Duncan for the French newscast at 8 p.m. Take another rendezvous with us tomorrow, and tonight is good night.